the guardian of the radiant spiral. Chapter 1. The ancestor who walked beneath the first dawn. First dawn. Escharon greets the first light. Long before rivers were given names by strangers, before trails crossed mesas, and before the towering cliffs of red sandstone echoed with unfamiliar voices, there lived a quiet Fremont community who called themselves the Samora, the people of the living stone. Their homes rested beside a seasonal stream that awakened each spring when snow melted upon distant mountains. Cottonwood shaded the water's edge, while fields of maize stretched across a narrow valley, wherever moisture lingered long enough to nourish the earth. Juniper and pinyon pine covered the rocky slopes above, and beyond them rose immense cliffs that glowed crimson every morning beneath the first light of the sun. The Samora believed every part of the world possessed memory. The wind remembered every voice. The river remembered every footprint. The stars remembered every promise. But above all, the stone remembered every generation. Their oldest teaching said no carving should ever be placed upon the sacred cliffs unless the story belonged not to one person, but to the entire people. Stone was patient. It carried wisdom far longer than any living tongue. Among the elders was an aged spiritual guide named Escharon. His hair had turned the pale silver of desert sage, yet his posture remained straight despite many winters. Around his shoulders rested a woven mantle decorated with eagle feathers, shells gathered through generations of trade, polished turquoise, and carefully braided yucca fiber. Children often asked why he wore the ancient mantle only during ceremonies. Escharon would smile. Because clothing may honor the body, he would answer, but sacred garments honor the promises we make. Every morning before sunrise, he climbed a sandstone ridge overlooking the valley. There he watched darkness surrender to light. He never greeted the sun with words. Instead, he stood silently until its first rays touched the cliffs. Only then did he bow. Many believed he prayed. He always corrected them. "I do not ask the sun for gifts," he would say. "I thank it for remembering us." One spring morning, a young apprentice named Tarek followed the elder without permission. Tarek had seen 16 summers. He learned quickly, hunted well, and carved stone with remarkable patience. But questions filled his thoughts faster than answers. He wished to understand everything. Why did the elders greet sunrise? Why did they never carve ordinary events upon the sacred wall? Why did the oldest stories speak of beings no one had ever seen? As Escharon stood quietly beneath the rising light, Tarek finally spoke. "Master, who taught the first people these ceremonies?" The elder continued watching the horizon. "The same one who taught the stone." Tarek frowned. "The stone cannot learn. It remembers." "How?" Escharon knelt and placed one hand upon the sandstone. "You hear silence." "I do. I hear thousands of footsteps." The young apprentice listened carefully. Only wind answered. That evening the Samora gathered around their largest fire. No drum sounded. No dancing began. Instead, every family sat quietly while Escharon lifted an ancient polished staff carved from juniper. The staff was older than anyone alive. Generation after generation had protected it. Its surface carried tiny circles, flowing lines, and delicate zigzags. Children believed those carvings had appeared by themselves. The elder knew otherwise. Each had been added during a ceremony after some great lesson had changed the people forever. Escharon raised the staff toward the stars. "Our ancestors," he began softly, "once walked as we walk." The children leaned closer, but they listened better than we do. One small girl whispered, "To whom?" The elder smiled. "To everything." He pointed toward the towering cliffs. Long before this village existed, before our grandparents' grandparents remembered these valleys, one traveler wandered alone across the desert. No one knew where he came from. No one knew whether he was born among people or among spirits. They only knew he carried no weapons. He carried only wisdom. The children imagined an old wanderer crossing endless stone. What was his name? Tarek asked. No one remembers. Then how do we remember him? Escharon gazed toward the stars. Because names disappear, character remains. Tarek questions the silent stone. The elder continued. The traveler walked until he reached the tallest cliff in the valley. He climbed alone. There he waited through an entire day without food. He watched sunrise. He watched sunset. He watched stars rise where daylight had disappeared. When dawn returned, he understood something every person before him had forgotten. The children leaned even closer. What did he discover? That the earth speaks slowly. Several children laughed. The elder nodded, so slowly that only patient hearts can hear. He returned the people. They laughed at him. They wanted quicker answers. They wanted easier paths. They wanted certainty. But the travelers simply smiled. He taught them to watch birds before traveling. He taught them to watch clouds before planting. He taught them to watch animals before hunting. He taught them to watch silence before speaking. The fire crackled gently. The people prospered. Tarek stared into the flames. So he became chief? Escharin shook his head. No. A warrior? No. A great hunter? No. What became of him? The elder smiled. He became something greater. What? A reminder. The next morning, Tarek walked alone beside the stream. He noticed dragonflies skimming the water. Small fish moved beneath reflections of cottonwood leaves. Everything appeared peaceful, yet his thoughts remained restless. How could someone become a reminder? People lived. People died. Stories faded. How could memory itself become stronger than time? As he climbed toward the sacred cliffs, he discovered Escharin already waiting. The elder carried no staff today. Only a smooth stone rested in his hands. Sit. Tarek obeyed. The elder handed him the stone. What do you see? A rock. What else? It is smooth? Why? The river shaped it. Did the river hurry? No. It changed the stone through patience. Escharin smiled. The strongest power is often the gentlest. Days became weeks. Spring warmed the valley. Maize sprouted. Children chased lizards between sandstone boulders. Hunters followed bighorn sheep across distant ridges. Life continued peacefully until strange weather arrived. Dark clouds gathered without rain. Lightning flashed far beyond the western mesas. Thunder echoed night after night. Yet no storms reached the valley. The elders became concerned. Birds changed their migration. Rabbits abandoned familiar trails. Even coyotes howled before sunset. Something unseen had begun moving across the land. One evening, Tarek climbed the ridge once more. Lightning illuminated distant mountains. For a brief moment, he thought he saw someone standing upon the highest cliff. The figure disappeared before darkness returned. He hurried down. Escharin, the elder looked up calmly. What troubles you? I saw someone. Who? I do not know. Perhaps someone watched the storm. No. Tarek hesitated. He looked different. The elder's expression grew thoughtful. Different how? I cannot see clearly. But he seemed larger than any person. Silence settled between them. Finally, Escharin spoke. Tomorrow we climb together. Before sunrise, they began ascending the tallest sandstone formation overlooking the valley. The climb took hours. Loose stones rolled beneath their feet. Golden eagles circled high overhead. The valley became smaller with every step. When they finally reached the summit, Tarek looked in every direction. Nothing moved except wind. No one is here. Escharin nodded. Not anymore. The apprentice looked confused. You believe me? I believe you saw something. What? The elder knelt beside bare sandstone. There, almost invisible beneath centuries of weather, rested faint peck marks. Not carvings, not footprints. Simply ancient patterns too worn to understand. Our ancestors climbed here. They watched the same horizon. They asked the same questions. Tarek studied the weathered stone. What answers did they find? Escharin looked toward the rising sun. They learned some visitors arrive with bodies, and some arrive only as understanding. The dream of the first guardian. That afternoon, the entire village prepared for the ceremony of returning light. Families gathered feathers, polished shells, woven baskets, and fragrant desert plants. No one hunted. No one argued. No one worked the fields. Instead, Every person climbed toward the sacred cliff before sunset. The ceremony happened only once each year. At the center of the gathering stood Escharon. He wore his oldest ceremonial headdress. Long eagle feathers rose above braided bands decorated with turquoise, shell, and polished bone. The children stared in awe. Tarek had never seen the elder appear so transformed. He looked less like an ordinary man, and more like someone carrying the dignity of countless generations. As darkness settled, Escharon lifted both hands. The heavens move, the seasons turn, the rivers return. Our lives pass, but gratitude remains. Every person bowed toward the western sky. As stars slowly appeared overhead, something unexpected happened. A brilliant shooting star crossed the entire horizon before vanishing beyond the eastern cliffs. The people gasped. Children pointed excitedly. Elders exchanged solemn glances. Then another appeared, and another. For several minutes, light streaked silently across the heavens. The sky seemed alive. Tark whispered, "What does it mean?" Escharon answered quietly, "The heavens are reminding us to look upward." Later that night, long after the villagers had returned home, Escharon remained alone beneath the stars. Tark watched from a respectful distance. The elder stood perfectly still. Suddenly a warm wind swept across the ridge. Not the cool wind of night, not the hot wind of summer. A gentle current unlike any Tark had ever felt. Escharon slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. He looked neither frightened nor surprised, only deeply moved. The following morning he gathered every elder before sunrise. "I have received a dream." The council fell silent. "In the dream I stood before the oldest cliff. The stone opened. From its light emerged one greater than any chief. He was clothed in patterns that moved like flowing water. His arms shimmered like lightning crossing distant mountains. Upon his head rested a great ceremonial crown unlike any fashioned by human hands. Across his chest spread a radiant fan of brilliant light, shining like the first sunrise after winter. Several elders lowered their heads. One whispered, "The first guardian." Escharon nodded slowly. He did not speak with words. He spoke with remembrance. The council waited. Finally the elder finished. "He has called us to the sacred cliff. And this time, we are not going merely to remember the ancestors. We are going to meet one." Chapter 2. The Ancestor Within the Stone. The sacred climb to the waiting wall. The council gathered before dawn. No fires burned. No one carried hunting bows. Even the youngest children sensed that this day differed from every ceremony their people had ever known. A cool breeze drifted through the cottonwoods while the eastern sky slowly brightened. Above the cliffs, the last stars faded one by one as though making room for something greater. Escharon stood before the people, wearing the ancient ceremonial mantle once more. His headdress rose high above his silver hair, its eagle feathers catching first hints of sunlight. Around his neck hung polished shells traded from distant peoples, turquoise gathered over many generations, and carved bone beads whose origins no one remembered. The old spiritual guide rested both hands upon the sacred juniper staff. Its worn carvings gleamed softly. Tiny circles, flowing lines, ancient zigzags. Every mark represented a lesson preserved through generations. Today, the staff felt heavier than it ever had before, not because of its weight, because of its responsibility. "Our ancestors walked before us," Escharon said quietly. "We honor them because they carried wisdom across the years." He looked toward the towering sandstone cliff. "But today, they may answer." Silence followed. No one questioned him. The Samora began climbing the sacred trail. The youngest walked beside their parents. Hunters helped the elders over loose stone. Women carried woven baskets filled with maize, seeds, feathers, and fragrant desert sage. Nobody hurried. The climb itself formed part of the ceremony. Each careful step reminded them that wisdom could never be rushed. As they rose higher, the valley spread beneath them. The seasonal streams shimmered like polished turquoise. Fields of maize appeared as tiny green patches among the desert stone. Golden light crept across distant mesas. Above them soared two golden eagles. Escharin stopped. He watched the birds circle without flapping their wings. "They ride the breath of the earth," he whispered. Tarek nodded. "I never noticed how little they struggle, because they trust what carries them." By mid-morning, they reached a broad sandstone terrace unlike any other place in the valley. Its smooth cliff face rose nearly 40 feet above the people. Wind had polished portions of the stone until they reflected sunlight like dull bronze. No carvings marked its surface. It remained untouched. Untouched because every generation believed the stone itself still waited. Nobody knew what it waited for, only that it was not yet time. The people formed a great circle. Children remained near their parents. No voices disturbed quiet. Even insects seemed strangely absent. The desert itself appeared to be listening. Escharin walked alone toward the immense wall. He placed one weathered hand upon the sandstone. The rock felt warm, almost alive. He closed his eyes. The breeze faded. The sounds of birds disappeared. Only silence remained. Not empty silence. Listening silence. Within his thoughts came neither words nor visions. Instead, he sensed countless generations standing behind him. People whose names had vanished. Children who had grown old. Hunters who had returned to dust. Mothers whose songs no longer echoed through the valley. Their lives had ended, yet their care for those still living had not. His heart filled with overwhelming peace. When he opened his eyes, tears rested quietly upon his face. Tarek stepped forward. "What did you hear?" The elder smiled gently. "Not voices." "Then what?" "Patience." The ceremony continued until noon. Families laid offerings upon flat stones, seeds, feathers, bright desert flowers. No one asked for rain. No one asked for success. Instead, each family simply offered gratitude. A father thanked the earth for feeding his children. A young girl thanked birds for teaching direction. An elderly woman thanked flowing water for remembering every spring. Tarek watched carefully. He realized no offering asked the world to become different. Each honored what already existed. Perhaps that had always been the point. As afternoon shadows shortened, strange clouds gathered above the cliffs. Unlike ordinary storm clouds, these remained brilliant white. Sunlight poured through them in radiant beams. One child pointed upward. The sky is making pathways. Several elders looked skyward. The rays spread outward in every direction, like great feathers. Or perhaps, like a fan. Escharin's breath caught. The dream, the radiant chest, the light of first sunrise. He slowly bowed. So it begins. The radiant guardian appears. Without warning, warm wind rushed through the terrace. Not violent, not frightening. Gentle. Every feather decorating the ceremonial garments began fluttering together. Juniper branches swayed. Children reached for their parents. The wind circled only one place. The untouched sandstone wall. Tiny grains of dust lifted into the air. Slowly, gracefully, like drifting stars. Then the light changed. Sunlight struck the cliff, an angle none of the elders had ever witnessed. Golden brilliance spread across the smooth stone. Shapes slowly emerged. Not carved, not painted. Seen only because light revealed them. Gasps spread through the gathering. A towering human form appeared within the sandstone itself. Its body seemed broad and rectangular. Its surface shimmered with countless tiny textures. Across its chest radiated an immense fan of light. Its arms stretched downward, covered in flowing patterns that reminded everyone of moving water, or lightning, or ripples crossing a quiet stream. Its legs carried the same living designs. Above its head rose an elaborate crown unlike any woven by human hands. The headdress appeared formed from light itself. The entire figure stood motionless, yet somehow alive. Nobody dared move. Children buried their faces against their mothers. Hunters lowered their eyes. Even Escharin felt very small. The great figure did not speak. It simply looked across the people, not judging, remembering. One elderly woman whispered through tears, "The first ancestor." Another elder shook his head. "No, the guardian." Then something extraordinary happened. The great figure slowly raised one hand, not toward the people, toward the sky. At that same moment, sunlight burst through the clouds once again. Its rays spread outward exactly like the radiant fan across the being's chest. The people understood, not with words, with feeling. The heavens, the earth, the guardian, they belonged together. None ruled the others. Each completed the others. Tarek stared without blinking. He expected fear. Instead, he felt something entirely different. Belonging, as though someone who had always known him had finally smiled. Without realizing it, he took one cautious step forward. Esherin gently reached out. No farther. Why? The lesson comes to those who wait. The figure lowered its hand. The warm wind shifted. Dust drifted gently around its feet. Within the swirling air appeared several small circles of light. They floated lazily around the immense being. Some glowed gold, others silver, others pale blue. Children watched in amazement. They're stars. An elder whispered, perhaps. Another replied, or seasons. Esherin smiled softly, or both. The circles continued moving. Each completed its own path. None collided. Each returned again and again, like the endless turning of time. Suddenly, Tarek remembered something. The tiny circles carved upon the sacred staff. He looked toward it, then toward the floating lights. They're the same. Esherin nodded. Our ancestors remembered. The circles slowly faded. Only the great figure remained. Then another wonder unfolded. Near its feet appeared a single glowing spiral. It began no larger than a bird's nest. Slowly it expanded, one graceful curve following another, always widening, never ending. Children watched the spiral turn. No sound accompanied it. Yet every person sensed movement, not spinning, journeying. The spiral seemed to invite every eye inward, then outward again, like breathing, like seasons, like rivers returning each spring. Esherin whispered, the path of life. One young hunter quietly asked, what does it lead to? The elder smiled, where it began. The living spiral of life. Tarek found himself remembering his childhood, his first hunt, his mother's songs, his grandfather's laughter. He remembered mistakes, kindness, loss, hope. Everything seemed connected, not scattered. Every experience formed part of something larger, just as every curve belonged to the spiral. Nothing had been wasted. Nothing stood alone. Tears filled his eyes. The guardian remained silent. Yet the people understood another lesson. Life never moved in straight lines. It returned, changed, stronger, wiser. The spiral was not repetition. It was transformation. Each journey brought new understanding, just as each spring differed from the last. Cloud shadows drifted across the valley below. The radiant figure slowly lowered both arms. As it did, sunlight caught the flowing patterns covering them. The zigzags shimmered brilliantly. They no longer resembled decoration alone. Some looked like rivers. Others resembled lightning. Others flowing feathers. Others the movement of snakes crossing sand. Others the ripples left behind by wind upon water. Tarek whispered, why so many patterns? Esherin answered without taking his eyes from the figure. Because one truth may wear many forms. The old spiritual guide slowly removed his ceremonial mantle, then his feathered headdress. Every person looked toward him in surprise. He carefully laid both upon the ground before the radiant being. My clothing honors generations. He bowed deeply. Your light honors creation. The great figure did not move, yet warm sunlight intensified. The mantle glowed. Each feather shone brilliantly. Children gasped. It appeared as though ordinary ceremonial clothing had become something far greater. Not because it had changed, because everyone finally understood why such garments mattered. They did not make leaders important. They reminded leaders whom they served. The sun slowly crossed the afternoon sky. Little by little the radiant figure began fading. The enormous form remained visible, then only its glowing outline, then only the brilliant fan across its chest. Finally, only sunlight remained upon the sandstone. Nothing else. The wall appeared untouched once more. Silence returned. Long silence. At last a child asked, "Did it leave?" Escharon looked gently toward the cliff. "No. Where is it?" The elder placed his hand upon the stone. "Exactly where it has always been." He turned toward the people. "The guardian has never belonged to the rock. The rock simply remembers." The Samora descended the mountain. That evening forever changed. No one argued over what they had witnessed. No one tried to explain it. Each carried away a different lesson. Some remembered the radiant chest that joined earth and sky. Some remembered the sacred headdress crowned with light. Some remembered the flowing zigzags that held the movements of water, lightning, feathers, and living energy. Some remembered the circles that traveled like stars and seasons. And every heart remembered the spiral, not merely as a shape, but as a journey every life must take. None of them yet knew that this miraculous vision was only the beginning, far greater responsibilities, and a test unlike any their people had ever faced, still waited beyond the next sunrise. Chapter 3. The Living Patterns of the Earth. Tark learns from silent water. The valley awakened beneath a silence unlike any the Samora had ever known. Usually, dawn arrived with birds greeting the rising sun, children laughing beside the stream, and hunters preparing for another day's journey across the sandstone ridges. This morning, no one hurried. Every person seemed to carry a quiet wonder inside them. The vision upon the sacred cliff had not faded with the night. It had settled into every heart. Even the children spoke softly, as though afraid loud voices might disturb a lesson still unfolding. Escharon climbed the eastern ridge before sunrise, just as he had every morning for countless seasons. Tark followed several steps behind. Neither spoke. When the first ray of sunlight crossed the valley, the elder bowed. This time, Tark bowed beside him, not because someone had instructed him, because he finally understood. The sunrise was not merely another beginning. It was a promise that light always returned. The radiant fan upon the guardian's chest had carried that same promise. After several quiet moments, Tark finally asked, "Master, why did the guardian never speak?" Escharon smiled. "Did you leave without learning?" "No." "Then perhaps words were unnecessary. But people teach with words. Sometimes." The elder picked up a smooth pebble. He dropped it gently into a small pool left behind by spring rain. Ripples spread across the water. Neither man spoke. Eventually the ripples disappeared. "What lesson did you hear?" Escharon asked. "I heard nothing." The elder nodded. "What lesson did you see?" Tark watched the still water. "The smallest action reaches farther than we expect." Escharon smiled. The water spoke. That afternoon the council gathered beneath the largest cottonwood tree in the village. Every elder had witnessed the radiant figure, yet each remembered something different. Elder Noma spoke first. "I believe the guardian came to remind us that the heavens watch over us." Another elder shook his head. "I believe the lesson belongs to the earth." A third answered, "I think it teaches both." The discussion continued quietly. Nobody argued. Every voice added another piece. Finally, they turned toward Escharon. "What did you see?" The old spiritual guide looked toward the distant cliff. "I saw remembrance." One elder frowned. "Only remembrance?" Escharon nodded. The guardian never introduced itself. It never demanded obedience. It never asked for offerings. It simply reminded us of truths already surrounding us. The elders considered his words. The heavens already shine. The rivers already flow. The seasons already turn. The ancestors already live within memory. We had simply stopped noticing. Silence followed. Everyone understood. During the following days, Escharon changed the way children were taught. Instead of beginning each morning with stories, he led them into the desert. There they spent hours saying almost nothing. At first the children became restless. When will the lesson begin? It already has. What are we supposed to do? Notice. One child spotted ants carrying seeds much larger than themselves. Another discovered tiny flowers blooming between cracks in solid stone. One watched ravens dropping nuts upon rocks to break their shells. Another noticed how bees always flew in nearly straight paths toward blooming plants. Every observation became part of the day's teaching. The desert itself had become their storyteller. Several weeks passed. Spring slowly yielded to early summer. The stream became narrower. Warm winds carried the scent of sagebrush across the valley. One afternoon, Tarek walked alone through a narrow canyon. He hoped silence might reveal more of the Guardian's lesson. Instead, he found something unexpected. A large rattlesnake lay stretched across the trail. It neither rattled nor struck. It simply rested. Tarek stopped several paces away. He waited. The snake slowly lifted its head. For several long moments, they watched one another. Then it quietly disappeared among the rocks. When Tarek returned, Esherin asked, "What delayed you?" "A rattlesnake." "And I waited." "Why?" "I realized the trail belonged to both of us." The elder smiled warmly. "You are beginning to hear. The desert becomes a teacher." That evening, the people gathered beside the stream. Children eagerly shared everything they had noticed. The hummingbird visits the red flowers before the yellow ones. The hawks fly higher when warm winds rise. The rabbits leave different tracks after rain. The moon changes where shadows fall beside cliffs. Each observation delighted the elders, not because the discoveries were new, because the children had finally begun paying attention. One evening, after sunset, Esherin called Tarek aside. "It is time." "For what?" "The Guardian showed us symbols. The people understand their meaning, but memory fades." Tarek looked toward the sacred cliff. "You wish to carve it." Esherin remained quiet for a long time. Finally he answered, "No, I wish the stone to remember." Several elders joined them before sunrise. No chisels were carried, no hammerstones, only woven blankets, food, and water. They climbed once more toward the great sandstone wall where the vision had appeared. When they reached the terrace, Esherin simply sat. The others looked puzzled. "We are not carving." "Not today." "What do we do?" "We wait." Hours passed. The desert changed around them. Morning insects appeared, then disappeared. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. Wind shifted several times. The light upon the cliff changed with every passing hour. Late in the afternoon, something remarkable happened. Sunlight revealed faint natural textures within the sandstone. Tiny patterns, not carved, always present. Lines, curves, subtle shapes. The elder smiled. The stone has been speaking all along. For 3 consecutive days they returned. Each day the sunlight illuminated different portions of the cliff. Sometimes broad curves appeared, sometimes faint circles, sometimes long flowing lines. None had been noticed before. Tarek suddenly understood. "We must carve with the stone, not against it." Esherin nodded. "The Guardian never forced the earth. Neither should we." That night, Esherin dreamed again. He stood before the radiant Guardian. This time the being slowly extended one arm. Its patterned limbs shimmered like flowing water. Then lightning, then feathers, then moving grasses. The changing patterns never stopped. One became another. Each remained connected. The Guardian finally touched the earth. Immediately plants began growing. Rain fell. Clouds formed. Birds took flight. Everything moved together. Nothing stood apart. When Esherin awoke before dawn, he understood another lesson. The zigzag patterns covering the Guardian's arms and legs were not decorations. They represented the living energy flowing through creation itself. Water, storms, wind, movement, life. He gathered the people. The Guardian wore the world. No one interrupted. The flowing patterns remind us that life is never still. The rivers move. The lightning moves. The birds move. The clouds move. Our own lives move. We are healthiest when we move with creation, not against it. A young hunter asked, "What if we resist?" The elder smiled gently. "Then we become like a fallen branch lying across a river. It cannot stop the water. It only wears itself away." Summer arrived fully. The stream shrank. Grass turned golden beneath the relentless sun. One morning a scout returned with troubling news. The bighorn sheep had left their familiar ridges weeks earlier than expected. Soon afterward, the mule deer disappeared as well. Hunters searched farther each day. Still they found little. Food remained sufficient. Yet concern spread quietly. The animals were telling the people something. They simply did not yet understand what. The rain lesson revealed. Several younger hunters urged immediate action. We should travel north. No, they have gone east. We'll lose valuable time. Voices began rising. Tark watched uneasily. Months earlier, the discussion might have become an argument. Instead, Esherin quietly stood. What did the guardian teach? The gathering fell silent. One hunter answered softly. Observe before acting. The elder nodded. So we shall. For 3 days, no hunting parties left the valley. Instead, small groups watched. Birds, clouds, wind, animal tracks, bees, everything. Children joined the observations. Even grandparents contributed. On the 4th morning, little Senna, only 8 summers old, approached the council. The swallows. What about them? They're building nests on the north side of cliffs. Several adults exchanged puzzled looks. Esherin smiled. What does that tell you? She thought carefully. They expect cooler winds. Another child spoke. The ants move their food to higher ground. An elder added, the evening clouds have grown larger. Tarek suddenly understood. Rain. Within 2 days, distant thunder echoed across the mesas. 3 days later, dark clouds rolled over the mountains. By sunset, steady rain filled the valley. The seasonal streams swelled. Plants lifted toward the sky. Fresh animal tracks appeared beside newly flowing water. The hunters had not needed to chase the herds. The land itself had revealed what was coming. The guardian's lesson had saved them. That evening, the people celebrated, not because rain had arrived, because wisdom had. Children laughed beside pools of fresh water. Women sang old songs nearly forgotten. Hunters thanked the animals for their silent guidance. As darkness settled, Tarek looked toward the sacred cliff glowing faintly beneath moonlight. We almost forgot how to listen. Esherin nodded. That is why memory must live longer than people. The old elder rested one hand upon the sacred staff. I believe the time has finally come. For the carving? Yes. But remember this, Tarek. The stone will not preserve our greatness. It will preserve our gratitude. Far above them, the stars slowly wheeled across the desert sky. Their silent circles mirrored the endless turning of the seasons. And beneath those ancient heavens, the Samora prepared for the greatest act of remembrance their people would ever undertake. Chapter 4. The Stone That Remembered. Permission from the sacred stone. The rains continued for many days, not with violent floods or destructive storms, but with the steady generosity the desert treasured. Water filled the seasonal stream until it once again wound through the valley like a shining ribbon. Cottonwoods stretched fresh green leaves toward the sky. Wildflowers appeared between sandstone ledges, and the fragrance of damp earth drifted across the land. The Samora greeted each sunrise with gratitude. Children laughed as they chased frogs that had returned to the shallow pools. Hunters once again found fresh tracks along the muddy banks. The valley seemed alive in ways it had not been for many seasons. Yet Esherin understood that the greatest gift had not been the rain. It had been remembrance. The people no longer looked only at the land. They listened to it. One evening, as the sun sailed behind the western cliffs, Esherin gathered every family beside the sacred fire. No one spoke while the elder stood. He rested both hands upon the ancient juniper staff. Its tiny circles, flowing lines, and zigzag carvings reflected the dancing firelight. For many generations, he began, our ancestors added small memories to this staff. He slowly raised it. It has served us faithfully. He looked toward the towering sandstone wall. But it does not live forever. Silence settled across the gathering. The stone does. A young mother asked quietly, will we carve the guardian? Esherin nodded. Yes. But not because we saw the guardian. Several people looked confused. We carve because one day Our grandchildren will not. The people understood. The carving would not preserve a miracle. It would preserve its lesson. The following morning the village prepared with great care. No ordinary tools were carried. Only the finest hammerstones gathered from smooth riverbeds. Only the hardest antler picks. Only carefully selected stones whose edges could peck the sandstone without shattering. No one considered the work ordinary. Every tool was blessed with fragrant sage smoke before the climb began. Children watched respectfully. No one laughed. No one played games. The journey itself had become sacred. When they reached the great sandstone wall, Escharin placed his hand upon the cliff. "We ask nothing from you," he whispered. "We ask only permission to remember." A warm breeze drifted across the terrace. It carried the scent of wet juniper. One feather detached itself from the elder's ceremonial mantle. Instead of falling, it floated gently until it rested against the sandstone. No one moved. Finally, Escharin smiled. "The stone has answered." The work began, not with great blows, with tiny ones. Tap, 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 thousands upon thousands of careful strikes. Each removed only a grain of sandstone. Children gathered the loose dust in woven baskets and returned it respectfully to the earth. Nothing was wasted. The people believed even the smallest fragment of the sacred cliff deserved honor. The first image to appear was not the guardian. It was a spiral. Some questioned the decision. Should not the guardian come first? Escharin shook his head. No, the journey comes before the traveler understands it. So they carved the graceful spiral low upon the panel, beginning from a small center, growing wider, always expanding, never ending. Children trace its shape in the air with their fingers. "What does it mean?" little Senna asked. Tarek smiled. "It means every ending becomes another beginning." After many days, the spiral stood complete. Its smooth curves caught the morning sunlight. Travelers approaching from the valley could already see it shining softly near the bottom of the Great Wall. Yet the largest work still waited. The guardian. The people worked together. No single person claimed ownership. Hunters carved beside potters. Weavers carved beside elders. Even children, once they were old enough to hold a small hammerstone safely, were allowed to make a single careful strike. Every generation helped, because every generation belonged to the story. The spiral is carved first. Escharin insisted that no face be carved. Several questioned him, but we saw the guardian. We remember the light. We remember the headdress. Why leave the face unknown? The elder smiled. So every child who stands here centuries from now may see not one person, but every ancestor. The broad rectangular body slowly emerged from the sandstone. Thousands upon thousands of peck marks filled its surface. Tarek noticed how sunlight shimmered across the textured stone. "It almost looks alive." Escharin nodded. "Life is not smooth." Every tiny mark represented a memory. Every memory strengthened the whole, just as every individual strengthened the people. Next came the great ceremonial headdress. Unlike those worn during village ceremonies, this one reached higher and spread wider. The people remembered how impossible it had seemed. It had not looked woven. It had looked radiant. They carved layered forms suggesting feathers rising toward the heavens. Children gathered eagle feathers beneath distant nesting cliffs and placed them respectfully below the carving each evening, not as offerings, as gratitude. The greatest challenge came next. The radiant fan across the guardian's chest. No one wished merely to copy what they had seen. They wished to remember what they had felt. For many days the elders debated. Finally, Escharin drew a broad semicircle stretching outward from the chest. Dozens of graceful rays spread like sunlight, like feathers, like hope. When morning light struck the completed design, the rays glowed brilliantly. Every person smiled. It remembers. Then came the arms. Unlike ordinary human limbs, they carried living patterns, zigzags, flowing lines, repeating designs. Some represented water, winding through canyons. Some represented lightning, illuminating summer skies. Some resembled feathers moving upon warm winds. Others echoed the paths snakes left upon desert sand. Children asked why so many meanings belonged together. Escharin answered, because creation never separates itself. The legs received similar flowing designs. A young hunter observed, "They almost look like movement." "They are movement," replied Tarek. "Even standing still, the guardian reminds us that life continues." While the carving progressed, something unexpected happened throughout the valley. The people changed, not through commands, through understanding. Hunters stopped taking more animals than families required. Children began returning injured birds to safety instead of treating them as toys. Water was shared more carefully during dry weeks. Even disagreements became quieter. When voices rose, someone would gently ask, "What would the guardian notice?" The answer usually ended the argument. Late one afternoon, a group of travelers entered the valley. They belonged to another Fremont community, living many days away. Trade between the peoples had existed for generations. They carried baskets, obsidian blades, shell ornaments, and dried berries. When they saw the great unfinished carving, they stood speechless. One elder finally asked, "Who is this?" Esherin answered honestly, "We do not know." The visitor looked surprised. "Then why carve it?" The old spiritual guide smiled. "Because not knowing has taught us more than certainty." The guardian takes shape. The visitors remained several days. Rather than exchanging only goods, the two communities exchanged stories. The Samora spoke of the radiant guardian. Their guests shared tales of ancient springs that never ran dry, mysterious stars appearing before harvest, and ancestors whose wisdom still guided dreams. None claimed absolute truth. Instead, each story became another thread woven into the fabric of memory. Before leaving, one visitor said, "Though our stories differ, their hearts are the same." As autumn approached, the carving neared completion. Only the circles remained. Children wondered why they had been saved for last. Esherin gathered everyone before sunrise. The circles remind us that no life stands alone. He pointed toward the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars. He pointed toward the valley, the seasons, the harvest, the returning rains. He pointed toward the people, birth, growth, old age, memory. Everything moves in circles. Each family carved one small circle beside the guardian, some large, some tiny, none exactly alike. Each represented a life, different, yet belonging to the same sky. When the last circle was completed, the first rays of dawn crossed the cliff. Light touched the spiral, then the guardian's feet, then the patterned legs, then the textured body, then the radiant chest. Finally, the great headdress. For one breathtaking moment, the entire figure seemed almost alive again, not because it moved, because sunlight remembered. Tears filled many eyes. Esherin quietly bowed. It is finished. But deep within his heart, he knew another lesson still waited. The stone had been carved. Now the people themselves would be tested to see whether they truly carried its wisdom. Chapter 5. The Eternal Keeper of the Stone. Tarek receives the sacred staff. The first frost arrived quietly. Silver crystals shimmered upon desert grasses before disappearing beneath the morning sun. The cottonwoods released their golden leaves into breeze, and flocks of birds began their long journeys toward warmer lands. The carved guardian watched over everything, morning after morning. Sunlight climbed slowly across the sandstone wall, exactly as it had on the day the carving was completed. The spiral greeted the dawn. The patterned legs awakened beneath golden light. The textured body seemed to glow. The radiant semicircle across the guardian's chest shone brilliantly before the great headdress finally welcomed the sun. Every sunrise became a ceremony. No one planned it. No one announced it. The people simply gathered. Children who once hurried toward the stream now paused before the cliff. Hunters preparing to follow game first stood quietly beneath the guardian. Women collecting seeds placed one hand gently upon the sandstone before beginning their work. Even strangers entering the valley found themselves lowering their voices. The place itself inspired reverence. Winter settled gently upon the high desert. Snow dusted the distant mountains while the Samora remained warm beside their fires. Each evening stories filled the village, yet something had changed. The people no longer told stories merely to entertain. Every tale carried a lesson. One night, Tarek asked the children, "What do you remember most about the Guardian?" Little Senna answered first, "The spiral." Another child smiled, "The beautiful feathers." A young hunter replied, "The lightning upon its arms." An elderly grandmother softly added, "The way it never spoke." Esherin listened quietly. Finally he asked, "And what did the silence say?" The fire crackled. After several thoughtful moments, Senna whispered, "Everything belongs together." The old elder smiled. "You have heard well." As winter passed into another spring, Esherin's steps became slower. His hair grew whiter. His hands trembled slightly whenever he lifted the sacred staff. Tarek noticed long before anyone else. One evening, he climbed beside the elder to familiar Sunrise Ridge. "You grow tired." Esherin laughed softly. "I grow older. There is a difference. There is also wisdom." The two men watched evening shadows stretch across the valley. "Do you fear dying?" Tarek finally asked. The elder remained silent for a long time. Then he gently shook his head. "No." "Why not?" "Because the spiral taught me. The journey never truly ends." Several weeks later, Esherin called the council together. His voice remained calm. "My time as keeper is ending." No one interrupted. "I have watched the land for many seasons. I have listened to the wind. I have carried the staff. Now another must continue." The elders turned toward Tarek. The young apprentice lowered his eyes. "I am not ready." Esherin smiled. "No one ever is." The following morning, the entire village climbed once again to the sacred terrace. The Guardian stood unchanged. Sunlight spread across its radiant chest exactly as it had countless mornings before. Esherin removed the ceremonial mantle, then the ancient headdress. Finally, he placed the sacred staff into Tarek's hands. "It is not yours." Tarek looked confused. "It belongs to those not yet born." The elder led him before the carved Guardian. "Look carefully." Tarek obeyed. "What do you see?" "The Guardian." "What else?" "The spiral, the circles, the flowing patterns, the headdress, the light." Esherin smiled. "You have named the carving. Now tell me what you understand." Tarek remained silent. At last he answered. "The spiral reminds us that life continues. The circles remind us that everything moves together. The patterned limbs remind us that creation is always alive. The radiant chest joins earth and sky. The headdress reminds us that true honor comes through service. The textured body reminds us that countless small lives create one people." Esherin nodded with quiet satisfaction. "And the Guardian?" Tarek looked into the ancient stone. "The Guardian reminds us to remember Esherin's final sunrise." That evening, Esherin remained alone beneath the cliff. Moonlight washed gently across the sandstone. The old elder rested one hand upon the carved spiral, then upon the Guardian's broad body. His fingers slowly followed the zigzag patterns carved along one arm. He smiled. "So many lessons." The breeze answered softly. High above, stars filled the desert sky. The same stars his grandparents had known. The same stars their grandparents had known. The same stars that would shine upon children thousands of seasons from now. He closed his eyes. "I thank you." No one knew whether he spoke to the Guardian, the stone, the ancestors, or the creator of them all. Perhaps there was no difference. When dawn arrived, Tarek climbed the ridge expecting to find Esherin watching the sunrise. Instead, he found the elder peacefully seated against the sandstone. His eyes were closed. One gentle smile remained upon his face. His hands rested quietly in his lap. The old keeper had completed his journey. The Samora mourned together. No loud cries echoed through the valley. Instead, they honored Esherin exactly as he had taught them. Children carried flowers. Hunters laid feathers beside the cliff. Families placed smooth river stones around the sacred terrace. Each remembered a lesson he had given. No two memories were identical. Together, they formed a complete life. After the mourning ended, Tarek stood before the people. He wore the ceremonial mantle. The ancient headdress rested upon his brow, yet he felt no greater than before. If anything, he felt smaller. The garments reminded him that leadership meant responsibility, not importance. He lifted the sacred staff. I cannot replace Escharon. No one should. I can only continue listening. The people bowed together. Years passed. Children became parents. Parents became elders. The Samora flourished. They planted carefully, hunted respectfully, shared generously. Whenever drought threatened, they observed the birds before acting. Whenever storms approached, they watched the insects. Whenever disagreement arose, they remembered the guardian's silence. The teaching spread naturally into every part of life, not because rules demanded it, because wisdom made life better. Travelers came from distant valleys. Some arrived from towering plateaus. Others crossed broad deserts. Many had never seen such a remarkable carving. They asked countless questions. Who does it represent? Tark always answered honestly. We do not know. Some seemed disappointed. Others smiled. One elderly traveler finally said, perhaps not knowing keeps the story alive. Tark bowed. So it does. Generations continued to pass. The sacred cliff slowly weathered. Wind softened sharp edges. Rain darkened portions of the stone. Lichens appeared and disappeared. The spiral remained. The guardian remained. The circles remained. The pattern limbs continued catching morning light. The radiant chest still glowed at sunrise. The headdress continued reaching toward the heavens. The stone remembered. The guardian watches through time. Centuries slipped by like flowing water. The Samora themselves eventually became ancestors. Children born far beyond their lifetimes walked through the same valley. Some knew only fragments of the old stories. Others knew none at all. Yet every generation paused before the towering figure. Something within the carving reached them, even without words, even without names. Long after the last person remembered Escharon's face, long after Tark's name had disappeared into time, long after the village itself had returned to the earth, the guardian still watched the sunrise. The spiral still welcomed every new season. The circle still reflected the endless movements of the heavens. The patterned limbs still reminded thoughtful visitors that rivers flow, lightning dances, feathers drift, and life never stands still. The great headdress still proclaimed that wisdom is earned through humility. The broad, textured body still testified that countless ordinary lives together create something extraordinary. The radiant semicircle across the chest still united earth, sky, ancestors, and a living in one eternal relationship. Many centuries later, strangers would stand before the ancient sandstone panel. They would wonder who created it. They would ask what the symbols meant. Some would see a ceremonial leader, others an ancestor, others a shaman, others a supernatural guardian. Some would recognize the spiral as life's journey. Others would see the turning seasons. Some would believe the circles represented stars, others the sun and moon. Many would notice the flowing zigzags and think of lightning, water, feathers, movement, or sacred power. They would study the remarkable headdress. They would admire the great textured body. They would debate its meaning with sincere curiosity. Yet no one could know with certainty, for the Samora had never intended the carving to be a written language. It was never a map. It was never meant to tell every detail of a single event. It was a living remembrance, a symbolic story carved into enduring stone so that each generation would pause, observe, reflect, and seek wisdom for itself. That mystery was not a flaw. It was part of the gift. For every person who stood before the guardian brought a different life, a different journey, and different questions, like the spiral itself. Understanding continued to grow with each return, and so the guardian fulfilled its purpose through every passing century, not by giving answers, but by inviting wonder. As long as the sandstone cliff endured beneath the desert sun, the ancient figure would continue its silent watch, reminding all who looked upon it that the deepest truths are often carried not in words, but in memory, gratitude, ceremony, and the enduring bond between people, the land, their ancestors, and the heavens above.
This story is a work of historical fiction inspired by archaeological interpretations of prehistoric Fremont rock art from the Colorado Plateau. The characters, tribe, ceremonies, mythology, and events are entirely fictional. Because the original meanings of ancient petroglyphs are unknown, this narrative is an imaginative legend rather than a historical reconstruction. It is offered as a celebration of the enduring mystery, artistry, and cultural legacy of the indigenous peoples who created these remarkable carvings. Thank you for listening. If this journey through the ancient Southwest inspired your imagination, consider following echoes occurred by the ancestors for more original legends inspired by the mysteries of prehistoric rock art, archaeology, and the timeless stories hidden within the stone.